In this tutorial, I'll show you how the theme editor works in Dungeon Architect. The theme system maps your meshes to marker nodes, the name points like walls, doors, ground, that get placed when your dungeon layout generates. By the end, you'll understand how to create variations, control probability, and build professional looking levels like these. Now let's create a new theme file. You do that by right-clicking on the content browser and select Dungeon Theme, or go to Dungeon Architect, Dungeon Theme. Double click to open up the theme editor. So this is the theme editor, and we have the theme graph here, and we have a preview window to preview the generated mesh, generated dungeons based on the meshes you specify in the mappings. So the first thing I need is a layout to preview the dungeon. So the layout is generated using a builder. So if you've selected something, click on an empty space here, and that will show the preview dungeons properties. So we want to change the builder to CellFlow, and this expects a CellFlow layout graph. We'll cover this more in detail later on. So we'll choose one of the existing ones that are in the plugin folder. So we don't see that here because it's not enabled. So click on the gear icon and say show plugin content and engine content, and let's select CellFlow graph Foundry. Alright, and there's another parameter called grid size. We'll get to that shortly. So let's build, and we don't see anything because we haven't specified any meshes. So the layout is generated, but it hasn't really spawned anything because we don't have a mapping. So let's go ahead and go to the engine content. Now if this weren't disabled, sometimes you might have just this. You need to enable the engine content. So go to engine, plugins, Dungeon Architect, showcase asset packs, Foundry, mesh. So you've got a few meshes to work with. Then let's drag drop the ground mesh over here, and this has created a mesh node for us. Now if I link it up, it has spawned this mesh wherever there's a ground marker node, which is a name point. And the layout generator, which we set up here, is generating those points, and the theme graph allows us to map the meshes onto those points. So it's pretty far away. Let's move closer to it, or you could just double click on this node and it'll take you to the nearest mesh that was spawned with this node. So these are the ground nodes. Now let me show you something important before we continue. Now I'll select the theme editor configuration by clicking on the empty space here, and you see this grid size parameter. It's set to 400 by 400 by 200. This needs to match your modular kit, the art asset that you're using, and any good modular asset would be designed around a certain tile size. So how do you find the number? A good way to do that is to just open up the ground mesh or the wall mesh and look at its size. So I'm going to open up the ground mesh, and if I look over here, it says approximate size is 400 by 400. So that is your kit size. So you can use that as the dimensions, and the Z is usually the size of your stairs, which is usually half the wall size. So you can set this to anything that matches your kit. It could be 500 by 500, 800 by 800. I'm using 400 by 400 in this example, which is the default. So let's continue. Now let's drop in some more assets. We have the wall, we have a few wall assets. So if I open this up, the size of this is 400 width, it's 400 wide. So this works. Let's put this in and attach it to the wall marker node, and we have the wall assets in place. So we also have a wall separator. So let's put in the pillar C, and add that in, and let's put in the door mesh. So we have this is the door mesh. We could scale it up and make it a bit more thicker, so 2.2, and bring it up by 1.3. So I've added a wall and I've added a pillar. Now let's add pipes to the wall. So we can have multiple meshes under a marker node. So we want to add this pipe mesh to the walls as well. And we're going to take it and add it to the left side of this. And the moment I add it, what happened here? We've got the pipe inserted, but then we no longer have this. So the reason this happened is because when the Gen Architect encounters this wall marker in the scene, it'll start executing everything that you have attached underneath it from left to right, and it'll start executing it, and it'll stop its execution if it selects a certain node. And by selection I mean it selects it for insertion into the scene. And we can control whether it gets selected or not based on a bunch of things, the easiest and straightforward being the probability. How often do you want this to be inserted in the scene? So this was inserted in the scene, and we stopped this execution if it was selected, and that happened because this checkbox is checked. So if I were to uncheck this, even though it's selected and inserted it onto the scene, it will continue execution down the line to all the other nodes. So this got selected, and it saw that this is unchecked, then it moved on to the next node and inserted this. Now let's fill in the rest of the markers. We have the stairs, we have the ceiling. So we have a stair mesh here. I'm gonna drag drop this, attach it to this, and if you don't know where the stair mesh is, just double click it and it'll take you to the nearest stair mesh. And here we need to obviously fix the transformation. So select this node, and you can change where it goes. You can adjust its offset. So we would like to rotate it by 90 degrees. So it does not matter how the artist exported your meshes. The pivot of the exported mesh could be anywhere. You can always come back here, select the node, and then adjust the location, rotation, and scale. And maybe reduce the scale along the X by 0.8. Okay. So we have the ceiling marker here, and I have a ceiling mesh. Let's drop that in. Great. And things become a bit dark, so let's add a few light nodes. So if you switch over to props, look over here, I have a few ceiling light meshes. So if I open them up, it looks like this. However, if you look at the size, it's 800, not 400. Right? And our grid size is 400. So if we arrange them next to each other 400 distance apart, they will start to overlap. So we need to scale it down after we put it in. So let's attach that here. Let's have another ceiling node here like this, and as you can see, it's overlapping. So we can select this one and reduce the size to 0.5. Let's uncheck the lock so we don't get even scaling. 0.5. Because it's 800, we want to bring it down to 400, hence the scale of 0.5 along the X and Y. Z could be fine. So this is what we get. So we do not get the original ceiling here because this gets selected, and we have stop if selected. This gets selected to be inserted onto the scene, and we have these, and we never come to this node because it is selected 100% of the time. Probability is 1, which means 100%. 0 is 0%, 0.5 is 50%. So let's change this. So if I select the light mesh node and I change this to 0.5, it will be selected 50% of the time. I hit enter. Now this is selected 50% of the time, and if it is selected, the execution stops. It never comes here. And if it were not selected, then it will move on to the next one, and here it will always insert because the probability is 1. So this is how you can have multiple meshes and select one of them. We can bring this down to maybe 0.2. So that's the basics of the theme editor. Next video, I'll show you the interactive theme editor mode where you do all this visually right in the main viewport. It's a much faster workflow.